Sisters bonafide. Sisters bonafide. Sisters bonafide. My sister.
That's a whole other thing. But just adding a bit to not admitting, when they need help physically, mentally, emotionally. So, like even my grandmother, she lost two children before she passed. And I was only 11 years old, so she lived with that for so long. But she needed intervention.
Mm-hmm.
She needed a psychiatric help. That is such a traumatic experience. And even after speaking to other doctors and them telling her, that you need to see somebody, you're suffering with anxiety, choosing to live like that, choosing to live with that anxiety, or because the thought of seeing a psychologist was a whole no. And that thought of in Black and brown communities, not checking your mental health. We all need a mental health check. We all need help sometimes, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means we live in this crazy ass life, and we need help moving forward sometimes. That's just the truth, and it is okay, and it is not a sign of weakness to admit that or get that.
But what happens if they admit it? You think about it. Remember, they're coming from a time where, again, they're worried about what other people think about them, particularly in the neighborhood, which they never leave. So they're worried about that getting out. Oh, this person's going to see a psychiatrist. They may be crazy or something happened to them. And is that being the talk of the town thing on a negative aspect? They don't want that.
Right.
That's something that gets passed down, from generation to generation. Now we have social media. Everybody puts their business out there. Sometimes it's overly exaggerated, but everybody puts their business out there in a way.
Yeah. I think you raised a good point too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. They didn't have that outlet. A lot of people say, oh, why this person? A lot of people use social media for venting. Yeah, so they don't have to be a psychiatrist. Yeah. Our parents, our grandparents didn't have it. All they knew is that, okay, this is happening in my life or this is happening in my household. I don't want the neighborhood to get a hold of it. Because if they do, that's it.
Right. Yes. The neighborhood, yes, and other family members too. I feel like I feel like a lot of our families are siloed into different, they've created their own little families within one big family. And I feel like, one household may not want somebody another household in the family to know their business. So it's a community-based thing, and it's also internally within the family too. There's just a lot of things that they just didn't want other family members to know. So I think that's a really good point. Just keeping those things internalized instead of letting it out is not the best way to live life. I mean, you don't have to tell everybody your business, like you said, Boo, earlier, in terms of letting everything hang out on social media. I'm not suggesting that, but hey, to each his own. But you have to talk to somebody. You have to know that these things will eventually eat away at you. And it's not healthy. The mind is part of the body. If you go to the doctor to get checked out for a physical, that the mind is part of that, is part of your body too. So you have to treat it kindly. So, and they just grew up not knowing how to do that. They didn't have the resources to do that. And when they did, they chose not to. So that's definitely a thing that has to end. But let's talk about real quick how, the older generations are harder on the girls or the women in the family than the guys. Do you guys have experiences with that? What y'all think about that?
Yes. I think so. First of all, I don't know. This is a thing in our family, and it's not just me. I've heard other women in my family say the same. It's expecting the girls to do everything. I remember my grandmother being hard on me. Every day was, oh, you better do good in school or this is gonna happen, or you better do this or this is gonna happen. But I never heard those talks reciprocated with the males in our family. I don't know if it was to have me embody or carry down what they considered strength. Things that I feel should have been carried from a man, not to say that I couldn't do it, but why me? Why you asking me first? It could be something carrying something that was 1,000 pounds and I would get asked first. Asking me to do something And if I wasn't available in the moment, I would say, oh, go ask this one or go ask that one. And then I'll be like, no, I don't want to bother them. Like, I never understood that. I never understood that thing of like being harder on the woman than on the man. But what do you think, Bobby?
Well, I think it depends. I think it comes from a lot of it has to do with if there was a man in the house. I think it's a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. If it's a single woman household, the woman's raising the kids by herself, there's no man constantly in the house or in the house at all, she's gonna be harder on the girls in order to show them, hey, I had a bad experience with a man, or I had bad experience with men. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to provide for yourself. Don't rely on no man. Exactly. And then it comes down to the boys of creating mama's boys. Well, they don't have men in the house. So let me love them a little. Let me show them a little extra love. Or let me let them get away with this because I want them to feel love since the father's not there. Right. And then even sometimes when the father is there, it becomes a thing where it's so restricted. Little girls or teenage girls or women are young women are so restricted that they can't breathe. And when they finally get their freedom, they go crazy. Right. Which there's nothing wrong with that. You have to experience life differently than what you're taught. You're taught the good and the bad, so you have that understanding. Mm-hmm. It's just, experiencing stuff that you were told not to. You're told not to touch the hot stove, but little kids still want to touch it. It's the same mentality you tell a girl, oh, you're not supposed to be going out there and dating all these type of men. She don't have nobody watching her no more. That's what she's gonna do. And the same for guys. You're not supposed to go out there and do this, and you're just gonna go out there and rebel because you've been so restricted. Right. Or the burden's been put on you so heavy because, okay, listen, this is how it has to be because this is how it was for me.
We accept help from our significant others. Like, we accept to do things as a team. And I think that's like something that happens more now. And I know that's something that happens in my relationship specifically. I almost felt like when he would do something for me and I would allow him to, it was like frowned upon, like him making me a sandwich. You know what I'm saying? It's this weird thing. I don't know what that is.
It comes from their bad experiences of, oh, he's doing this for you, so he must want something from you.
Yes.
Because they dealt with it. And let's be honest. I think even in our generation now, people are attracted to the wrong type of things and don't realize it. You have a type, and a lot of people who are single or can't get into a proper relationship is because they're attracted to the same type of person over and over and over. The person may look different, but the book cover may be different, but it's the same book inside. Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing for our grandparents or our parents. They were attracted to something, and they were constantly getting used or constantly getting hurt. So now it's okay. You got this man in your life. He's making you that sandwich because he wants something. That's what comes to their mind.
And for us as women, like not needing a man for anything translates like that man could never be loyal to you, or that man, it doesn't matter how good they are. It doesn't matter how many years you could be together, 35 years. At some point, they'll mess up.
Exactly.
Then live.
Because of their traumatic, the traumas they're bringing from their past relationships. Now, chances are they were dealing with the same. I'm going to talk as for the women of the family. They're dealing with the same type of men over and over and over. Again, the book cover may be different, but it's the same book. Right. So you're going to go through the same chapters, the same thing. It might even be worded a little differently, but it's the same book over and over. They don't know that. What they're seeing is that, oh, I'm giving myself to this man and he hurt me. Right. So all these men are going to hurt my daughter.
Right.
And it builds a lot of wedges within communities because now, oh, you shouldn't date guys from this community because your father or this guy I was dating is from this community and you see how he treated me.
Right.
And it develops a lot of internal struggle as well. That's a big beef that you see on social media with men and women now because their parents, men and women, have been scorned and they don't know why. And a lot of it has to do is that you just keep picking the same apples over and over instead of going to a different tree and getting some fresh apples.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think just to kind of close this, I think a lot of it has to do with the level of tolerance that people are willing to take. Like I feel like the older generation is we're just intolerant of any kind of nonsense. So like the first little thing that happens, or if they slip up, because they can't be wrong, but like the other person can always be wrong. So like if this just one thing that happens that's like, oh my God, I can't move past this, like then they're ready to call it quits. But it's like, you know, at some point you have to realize that everybody's going to come with some type of baggage, some type of faults that, you know, that you may not necessarily agree with all the time, but you have to be willing to have some type of tolerance with people, because not everybody's perfect. So if you're going to shun somebody, you know, for making one mistake or two every now and again, you'll never find happiness, and you'll always be looking for the worst in people. So I think that to me personally, that's a big part of the older generation, just like not being able to see, so to speak, the forest through the trees. Like you have to be able to see, like there's more to this person than what you're trying to make them out to be. And, you know, you have to be willing to tolerate, I'm not saying tolerate, you know, abuse in any kind of way, shape or form, but people are going to mess up, and that's okay. Y'all messed up. Like we all mess up every now and again, but it's all about tolerance. And I feel like they were short fuses because of everything that they had gone through that we talked about earlier. So they just didn't have the time to tolerate anything. But, you know, today's generation, like, you know, we forgive, and we move on. That's human nature. That's just how it is. But they were built a little differently. So that I just wanted to close, you know, to mention that, because it's, I don't know. The older generation is something else.
But it's a double-edged sword too, because you have a lot of people from the older generation that stick with someone that is not good for them at all. That either mentally abuse them, physically abuse them, or emotionally abuse them, and they stick it out. And you tend to see a lot of that people who are hurt in those type of relationships try to steer you away from it, because they've been damaged so much that they have a fear that that's going to happen to you. So it's coming from a cautionary place more than a damage, you know, more than a place of being damaged. Well, I've been scorned, so you're going to most likely be scorned too. They're probably seeing it as, oh, look, I've been putting up with this person for 30 years and they haven't changed. Don't end up like me.
Right. Well, going on with these crazy things that they expect us to go along with, I know one of the biggest things that happened and was always a thing between my grandmother and I was just the fact that it's their way or the highway. Like what I say, my word is bond, that's it, and not being open to hearing somebody else's explanation, even if in some instances they know that they're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's definitely something that I feel like has carried on until like our teenage and adult years, where it's like, you know, you're so used to not being heard and not being fully understood that like you just tend to just, you know what, just forget it. I don't have the energy to argue or to like prove myself to be right to, you know, to someone, because they're not going to listen anyway. But that, you know, that's definitely the wrong way to, you know, to be brought up. And that, you know, I feel like children, as long as it's respectful, children, teenagers, adults, like they should feel comfortable with talking and expressing themselves and proving why they're right. Even if the older generations, they may not want to hear it at that point, but you know, you have to be willing to know that, listen, you're not always right. Your perspective is not the only perspective. We're all going through different, you know, stages in our lives, and we see things differently. And you have, you know, as old as, you know, as some of the older generations are, they still can learn from younger generations. And I feel like that, you know, a lot of them felt like their learning had stopped when they got to a certain point in their lives, because they had just gone through so much. But you got to see things from a different perspective and be able to listen and understand, like, no, this is not the only right way. Like there's another way of going about it. But, you know, that is something that kind of irks me, because it's like the children just aren't being heard. And then they tend to lash out as they get older because they weren't heard by their families and stuff like that. So
exactly.
Yeah. I don't know, Louie, you have anything to add?
They tend to feel unloved because they weren't heard. But that goes back to that's a toxic trait that's passed down from generations ago. It's my way or the highway.
Yes.
I'm the man or the woman in this house. This is my house. You have to listen to me. Yada yada yada. You know, we have to. I think our generation understands things a little differently because we have more information available to us. Our parents, grandparents, didn't have that. It was their way or the highway. You don't want to listen, well, then you leave. Oh, you're going, I work 18 hours a day. You're going to school. School is not that serious. But these kids are getting traumatized. And when they come home and they need a release, the parent is not taking it serious, not hearing it, or just brushing it off. And it does mess with the kids' thing and makes them feel unloved. It makes them feel like they're not as important, or they do tend, like Coco said, to lash out. And it's a toxic trait that was passed down from a long, long time ago.
That was a real struggle. But going on into the dynamic between, parents and children, and something that I feel, really strongly about, I think the older generation, not setting children up for success, like past when they leave the household, and it not that we knew what was important, because I think when we saw all the struggles that we went through as children, we kind of knew growing up what we didn't want for ourselves. But I don't think we had help with implementing those things. I think we had to figure out how to apply for college, what we had to do in order to, save money. Not to say you give your kids everything, but you aid them in moving forward into even adulthood. Like, it doesn't stop when you turn 18, I don't know what you guys think.
To be on their side on this one, I understand what you ladies are saying, but you got to remember too, it's hard. It's a lot harder for them because we came into a huge technology boom where technology rapidly changed. So our grandparents, parents, they prepared us for a world that no longer exists. So they're preparing us for the world they understood.
Right.
Where, okay, you could go to high school and get a job and live off that job and, take care of your family. By the time it came up for us, it wasn't the case. We needed college, we needed something, or to get lucky or something else. They didn't understand how to invest in their community. Why invest in the community when the community's no good? They didn't see the bigger picture as, this is going to blossom one day into something else.
Right.
All they saw was, okay, we're going to give you the equipment you need to run the race, but we're not going to train you. You got to run this race yourself, and hopefully, you could get to the finish line. And this is and remember, that's how they were prepared. They're most likely from a coming off the post-war era where, okay, you're going to work in a factory, you're going to be able to sustain a living working in that factory, and that'll be your job for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Your wife will be able to stay home, and I'll go work to the factory. She'll take care of the kids, raise the kids, and then they'll go to college or get a job. When it came time to our parents' thing, that wasn't the same no more. Now you needed both parents to.
Right.
And if they couldn't get a job, a fair enough paying job, whether it's due to luck or lack of education or whatever the case, then you were kind of stuck. And then you had to prepare these kids for something else, which you couldn't understand. They didn't understand how to save or invest.
Right.
So again, they prepared us for a world that no longer exists. Their world that they prepared us for isn't there no more. And it's probably going to become the same for our children as well.
But I was even afraid of telling them when something became too hard for me, or asking for help later. Like, you can tell your kids, you want them to be independent. You can tell them what they need to do so they can have the future you hope for them to have. But I felt alone. I don't know if that was the same for you guys, but I felt alone and like getting there, even from young. It was always oh, well, this is what you should do, but there was never any interest further than that. There was never any interest on actually how are you feeling, or how can I help you?
Most definitely. I think that transitions perfectly into, the next topic. I feel like a lot of the older generations, they're just, concerned with stability. And as long as you're able to get by, that's all that matters. Because but what they don't understand now is that, especially as Black and brown people, we have to work twice as hard to get to even a fraction of what we want to get to, or versus another group of people. So it's take kind of jumping out on a leap of faith and just hoping for the best was never their mentality. If they had a job, my great grandfather worked for this guy who a company who delivered vegetables and shrimps and all types of seafood throughout the neighborhoods and stuff like that. And he stayed there until he got sick and couldn't work anymore. for like 25, 30 years. That's not typical now. You know what I'm saying? And like when you talk to an older person about it, it's like, oh God, you switching jobs again? Oh, you going back to school for what? Like it's not the same it's not the same generation, it's not the same time. And they have to understand that. And just one quick story for me personally, when I bought my place, it was, are you sure you want to invest in that? Like that's a lot of money. That's a risk. And I'm like, I would explain to even my mother and my grandmother. It was like, they're not used to that, and I understand that, I respect it. But in order for you to change your trajectory, you have to be willing to change your vision and understand that, listen, sometimes you have to take risks in order for you to grow, because otherwise you're going to stay stagnant. And we're not living in a world where being stagnant is being successful. You have to be willing to move around and find, your happy place, and find where you can be where you can be your best self. It's not like that. It wasn't like that before. So I respect it and I understand it from their perspective, but the world is a different place now. So that's just my 2 cents on that. I don't know how y'all feel.
I think that you said it too. Like we're not taking away from the reasons why they did the things that they did. It's just that those things do not apply to us now. And it's still being hard for them to understand that. Right. And we respect the hustle. We respect the way that they move. And I mean, I know, like we talked about in our previous episode, a lot of that molded us into the people we are today. And we do carry a lot of that in a positive way. But where's your mind at, Bro Bree?
Well, the kids nowadays have a huge advantage because they're going to be technologically advanced.
Right.
Whereas these kids come out the womb knowing how to use a iPad or tablet or whatever. We had to learn how to adjust to that. Our parents or grandparents, some of them will never learn how to adjust to that. It's just not part of their, it's not what they're used to, and some of them are not willing to adapt, which, you understand that some of them don't trust it.
Right.
But that's another thing. It's a big thing because the way the world changes, these kids are going to be well prepared for it. So it's kind of like a trickle down effect. There's a lot of toxic behaviors that come with it, but there's also a lot of positive lessons that came from it. And again, it's how you see it. If you see it half empty or half full. If you see it half empty, you're going to just repeat the cycle. If you see it half full, you're going to understand, okay, I seen this person mess up. I'm not going to make that mistake. I think another issue we have, I think it's still going to go on today for a few generations, is parents understanding that their kids are not supposed to take care of them after a while. When you get older, yes. But you got to understand that the kids are supposed to move out, break away from the family and start their own family and not focus around you, not be a mama's boy for the rest of his life or a daddy's girl for the rest of their life, where you're basically becoming that person's significant other symbolically, not physically, but symbolically. Where you're taking care of this person. If they're sick or something, yes. But if they're just lonely and they don't want to meet somebody, hey, that's on them. It's your job as a parent to prepare this child to be in a world without.
Yeah, I mean, life now is about adaptation. Like you have to be able to adapt. And I feel like, the stresses of today are much more strenuous than it was back in the day. So, it kind of irks me to when you hear like older people say, oh, y'all millennials, y'all something else, but y'all don't know what we have to deal with. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of stresses. It's a lot of environmental factors that we don't have any control over. So I think as much as they want us to give them grace, they have to be willing to give us some grace too, and understand that the world is different, like you said. So,
Bro, Bree,
I totally agree, and I think remember they set us on the path, and how we choose to go down that path, that's really on us at the end of the day. But a lot of it, they've been through stuff that we probably didn't have to experience. You know what I mean? Some of the men had to go into the army. It wasn't like a thing like, yo, you have no choice. And then they came back and they never, got help or never got addressed for their issues, and that got taken out on their family. A lot of the women had to do stuff that they probably were more capable of doing because they were taught that it was a woman's place to be at home. They never got to blossom and reach their full potential. And they probably were excellent moms, but they never reached their full potential. So a lot of that does stay, and they do see it in the younger generation. But a lot of the negative is there. Remember, they come from a different world than us. So the world is a lot different now where people could understand it. It still exists 110%. It never went away. But there's ways to get around it, I think, more than what they had. Remember, they were born in the neighborhood. Unless they did a big move, they were probably going to stay in that neighborhood until they got old.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that was it. Now, people are moving, people are understanding this stuff. So a lot of the negative aspects that they brought on us, yes, they'll never adapt. They'll eventually phase out. Where their opinion won't matter because the world is not set up for them no more.
Right.
So a lot of the hardships they went through, they try to prepare us for it, but it sometimes came across as negative or toxic because they didn't have the same information that we have today. So a lot of it is their fault for not adapting, but a lot of it is not their fault because they weren't prepared for it.
The world is constantly moving and growing and changing. So it's like we're always going to be constantly moving. And I feel like, the older generation, they're the only ones that are just reluctant to see that change. But, we have to be the ones to try to, if we feel the need to convince them, like, listen, we can't stay stagnant. This is not a world where we will be successful with staying stagnant. We have to be able to mold ourselves into the world that's just growing around us. And that's just what it is. So
everything is about adapting. And they, some of them lived a really long life before they're 40. They lived a really hard life, whether it was due to racism, whether it was due to abuse, drugs, dealing with a neighborhood around them that's falling apart. They lived a long life before they got
old. Right.
So they're so set in their ways that all they know is all they know. That's it.
Right. Yeah. I agree. Well said. All right, y'all. So it's getting late. This has been good. And we have to do this again another time.
Thank you, ladies, for having me.
What you said?
I said, thank you, ladies, for having me.
Oh, of course.
Thank you, Boo, for coming on and giving me your perspective. And y'all go check out the Life with Louie podcast. He has some amazing, amazing content on there. You can find it on Spotify and Anchor. And Lou, what's your Instagram handle if you want them to know what's going on?
Louis_freaking_Ramos. That's my Instagram name. So you can follow me on there. I have to do more podcast episodes. I haven't done one in a while. I kind of fell off of that, but I'll get back to it eventually.
No, but you have enough to keep them listening for the time being. So I think you have enough content and enough juicy stuff to keep them engaged. So definitely check that out, y'all.
I was gonna say that, and I'll add his handle in the description. So we will speak to you guys later. Until next Friday, y'all. Bye.
Bye. Later.
It's official. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Ding. Sistas Bonafide.